to Focal Point AFR Talk. Brian Fisher is my name. The program is Focal Point, the network, the American Family Radio Talk Network, AFR Talk. We're going to go right back to the phones here, 888-589-8840, as we continue to process together this tragic shooting in Connecticut. So I invite you to weigh in. You know, it's interesting. I sent a tweet out this morning about this tragedy, you know, once again, just lamenting the fact that it was highly unlikely that there was anybody in this school that was prepared or equipped to defend these poor, vulnerable, innocent, helpless little children. And that, to me, is a tragedy. You know, we have a Second Amendment that is designed specifically to allow the American people to defend themselves against lethal criminal force. And that right is prohibited from being exercised in school settings. Nobody can carry there. You got a school resource officer. We had that call earlier from someone that, yeah, we had school resource officers where we were, but we've had budget cuts. So we had each school resource officer is responsible for like 4 schools. They can't be everywhere at once. They can't be in even 2 places at the same time. So he may be providing some level of security in one school, but that leaves 3 other schools completely unattended by anybody who has a weapon to defend the students and the faculty at that school. And I was just blasted on Twitter, just absolutely blasted for taking this tragedy and turning it into a political agenda. And I wrote that out of my grief over the senseless slaughter of these children and a desire to see that children in other circumstances have more protection than that. That's what broke my heart. And that, I think, is part of the solution, is just to simply honor the Constitution and the Second Amendment right for the people of the United States. That includes principals. That includes vice principals. That includes teachers. The right to keep and bear arms. And I was just hammered for that, for prostituting this tragedy for a political agenda. Now I'm looking at a story here. MSNBC host Alex Wagner, she jumped on this thing right away, saying that she hopes that this tragedy will provide the, quote, political capital to introduce reform in American gun ownership laws. So she's wanting to use this to try to prohibit the sale of guns. So here all this time, I have liberals incessantly telling me on Twitter, you can't use this for political purposes. Well, here's one of your heroines, Alex Wagner, host at MSNBC, doing exactly the same thing. And here all this time, I thought that was supposed to be bad. Let's go back to the phones. Let's go to Lee in Camden, Tennessee. Lee, you are on Focal Point with Brian Fisher. What's on your mind?
Well, first of all, I'd like to say thank you for this forum. All Christians really appreciate that.
Thank you.
Thank you for allowing me on your show.
You're welcome. Go ahead.
First of all, I believe this young man had a real failure to communicate with his parents. Wouldn't you say so?
Well, you know, we don't know. I mean, it's a mystery to me. I'm not prepared to make any judgments ahead of time, but, you know, quite obviously something went disastrously wrong in his relationship with his parents.
Well, a lot of young people today, in my opinion, spend a little bit too much time on the Facebooks, the Twitter, the personal computers altogether, the personal listening devices, the iPods, not to name drop name brands, but they spend a lot of time in the false worlds, the computer worlds. And I believe they get caught up in this. And like a gentleman said that he didn't have a lot of friends on Facebooks. He had over 100 friends on Facebook. Well, a lot of these friends that they get on Facebook are complete strangers. They friend people that they don't even know. Personally, I'm not on Facebook. Personally, I don't even have a computer. Now, a lot of people would say I'm still in the Stone Age, but that's okay with me. I don't need a computer. I pay all my bills in person. I do have a cell phone.
Well, you know, and I appreciate your call. Because, one of the interesting things, and thank you for the call, Lee, one of the interesting things is that, the more technological options we have, the more social media we have and can use, the less face-to-face time we spend with people. We sort of retreat and we connect with people via a social medium rather than connecting with them over a cup of coffee or face-to-face or by having them in our homes. Let's go to Darren in Corinth, Mississippi. Darren, welcome to Focal Point. What's on your mind?
Hey, Brian, I'm the one that come by and shook your hand there earlier today.
Hey, well, thanks for giving me a buzz back. It was great to meet you this morning. Thanks for coming by.
Well, thank you. This was reported, around 1 o'clock when this happened our time?
Well, the shooting, I think, was first reported in at about 9:41 Eastern time, so that would be 8:41 Central time.
Okay, well, we had not heard nothing back because when I stopped by and seen you, we went and got us something to eat and went over to Toys R Us, and we come back out. I turned your show on and I started hearing it, and I've got my 4-year-old son with me right now, and I've got my friend here, my good friend from church. He's got 2 young boys and himself. We heard this story, and we're just really grieving this, and it's really hurting our hearts. I mean, because I just can't imagine, Brian, what these families have got to walk up to and find out if their child is the one that's been shot. And I just ask everybody that's a Christian that when they go home tonight and they put their kids to bed, let's all pray for these families. We are just really grieving and mourning right now for these families, and we're really hurt. So we're just, Brian, we appreciate everything you're doing on this radio, and you're spot on with everything you're saying. And let's bind together tonight in prayer, and let's pray for peace for these families while they go through this terrible grief.
Thank you, Darren. That's a great word of encouragement. And clearly, I think something that we need to do, and I think a lot of families are going to do that very thing tonight, to pray with their families, with their spouses, for protection in our school system. And I think the larger issue here is we need to pray for a spiritual awakening in this land. I mean, this shows how desperate the need is that we have as a people, that our children are not even safe in elementary school, in kindergarten anymore. And I think of the words from the first chapter of Isaiah, and this could have been written today for the United States of America. He's talking about the nation of his day. From the sole of the foot even to the head, there is no soundness in it. The whole head is sick, and the whole heart is faint. Nothing but bruises and sores and raw wounds. They are not pressed out or bound up or softened with oil. And that's how Isaiah saw the nation of his day, bruised and bloodied and battered and beaten. And the problem in Isaiah's day was the same as the problem in ours. They had forgotten God. They had turned away from God. And Alexander Solzhenitsyn said, we have forgotten God. That's why all this has happened. He was talking about what happened in the USSR and Stalinist Russia. 50 million people dead under totalitarian communism. And he said, why has all this happened? Why this carnage? Why this brutality? Why this inhumanity? We have forgotten God. That's why all this has happened. Let's go to Anthony in Tyler, Texas. Anthony, you're on Focal Point. What's on your mind? Anthony, are you with me?
Thanks for having me, Brian.
Yeah, go ahead. You're on with Brian Fisher. Go ahead.
I wanted to comment about, I have 3 nephews, and every time I see them, they're always on a very violent and vicious video game, and it's just disgusting the way that we allow kids to go to video game stores and buy these games and possess them with these thoughts. And that's how I think it's so easy for them to get to where they want to go and shoot things up and be insane. And they also, every time I'm riding with them, I have Christian music. I have you playing on my radio, and they want to listen to hip-hop. They want to listen to this because they don't like Christian music. And so I put it on the hip-hop for just a second to see what they say on those channels, those public radio channels, and it is horrible, Brian. That these people are saying things that I have never heard before, and I grew up old-fashioned where you don't hear those kind of things, or you get a good old whooping if you say those kind of things.
Well, Anthony, I appreciate your call, and thank you for that. And I would just suggest, Anthony, next time they're in your car, you just keep it on your channel. You say, hey,
yeah.
this is my car, my music, end of story. And maybe there'll be an exposure to something, that they need to hear. And I think what Anthony's talking about, and thank you for the call, Anthony, what Anthony's talking about is the corrosive impact of entertainment on the minds and hearts and the value systems of impressionable young people. I mean, we're seeing more and more stories. There's been an epidemic of this in the UK where teens, especially young boys, but it's also true among females, are being exposed to hardcore pornography virtually unlimited at young ages, way before they're ready to process that kind of imagery. And it's distorting the way they view sexual intimacy, and it's distorting the way they look at women, and it's distorting their understanding of sexual expression. So you're having this rash of rapes that are carried out by boys that are 10, 11, 12, and 13 years old. Where are they getting those ideas? They're getting those from what they see on the internet. And so we know from that there is this powerful corrosive effect about the images and what they're exposed to in media. And I think the same thing's got to be true when it comes to violence. I think Anthony's exactly right. If you have young boys especially that grow up with a consistent exposure to these violent images, a lot of these are first-person shooter games. The violence is graphic. The blood is realistic. You've got severed limbs. You've got high body count on the streets and in the gutters and everywhere. And they kind of grow up, and if they get exposed to this stuff at a very early age, when they're not mature enough to be able to process all of that and compartmentalize all that, then I think it begins to sort of numb them to the reality of what violence is really all about. It all becomes sort of cartoonish and almost make-believe. And so I think it kind of lowers the threshold. And, this guy was 24. I mean, who knows how much violence he's been exposed to or had been exposed to in his life, either through violent video games or through what he was exposed to through the movies that he went to with the slasher flicks and all that kind of thing. You have no idea how his mind might have been warped and corroded by those things. Focal Point AFR Talk, 888-589-8840. Back with more of your calls. Stay with us.